started as a quiet internal process was meant to stay hidden. But when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't just change the conversation, it changed everything. Nobody expected the truth to leak like this. Not the negotiators, not the executives, not the people who thought they had time. Because for months, everything was happening behind closed doors. Quiet calls, draft language, numbers adjusted, promises floated but never written down. That's how negotiations usually work. Slow, controlled, predictable. Until they weren't, because the moment the documents started circulating, the story flipped, not just for the league, but for everyone watching from the outside. Fans who had trusted the process, players who had waited, networks that had been quietly evaluating their options. And right in the middle of it all was a name nobody could escape: Caitlin Clark. Here's what insiders say happened. The CBA talks were already tense, not explosive, just heavy. Pay structures debated, media rights argued, scheduling concessions delayed. And while leadership insisted everything was moving in the right direction, the leaked pages told a different story. A story of hesitation, of limits, of fear about giving one player too much leverage. That fear mattered because leverage was already shifting. While the league was busy negotiating with itself, the audience was moving, slowly at first, then all at once. People weren't tuning out of basketball, they were tuning into her. And that's when the first mistake happened. Instead of reading the moment, leadership doubled down on control. Keep the spotlight inside the system, keep the messaging uniform, keep the power centralized. That's what the documents suggest. Not malicious, just outdated, because the world outside the meeting rooms had changed.
What does bother me is some of the people I deeply respect, their basketball credentials, their basketball history, their commitment to basketball and women's basketball, I think have really not covered themselves in glory with some of this commentary. And I'm going to read you a quote, Colin, if I may, from, again, this person might know more about women's basketball than any person who's ever lived, and that's Gino Auriemma. Gino Auriemma was on with my pal Dan Patrick a couple months ago when the Fever were struggling. And this was the quote: "This kid's on the wrong team. She's got the wrong skill set to handle the physicality in the league, and she's a rookie. This rookie class isn't even one of the best classes in the last 10 years. She's just not built for the physicality of this league. She's not quick enough to get away from the physicality." End quote. Gino, just say you're a UConn guy and you thought this was going to be Paige, and instead it's Caitlin.
The shift didn't come with announcements or approval, it came with a single call that quietly changed the balance of power and forced everyone to pay attention. When NBC Sports called, they didn't ask for permission, they didn't wait for alignment, they made a decision. Prime time, NBA broadcast, millions watching, a platform that didn't need explaining. The result was immediate. The debut didn't feel like a cameo, it felt like a takeover. Calm delivery, confident analysis, no rookie nerves, no scripted talking points. Viewers noticed, clips traveled, engagement surged, and the most uncomfortable metric landed within hours. People weren't just watching, they were staying. Meanwhile, something else happened, something nobody wanted to say out loud. Unfollows.
Caitlin and that class by not being prepared for it, and the fact that so many journalists across the country, institutions failed to cover this league. Like, there's just so many institutionalized failings that now the league is attempting to hurdle over.
What do you think is the biggest thing, just as far as the product on the floor? Because a lot of people talk about physicality, a lot of people talk about the referees. I actually did a deep dive in one of my episodes talking about like who the referees are calling to, essentially, where the W gets their referees. But as far as the product, because at the end of the day, fans are not going to stick around if it's not a good product, period. Like, they have to be there for the basketball, and I think
What followed wasn't gradual or subtle, it was a visible shift that exposed the gap between expectation and reality, forcing uncomfortable comparisons into the open. Not in small numbers, not spread out, a wave. Accounts tied to league content saw drops. Secondary projects saw drops. Unrivaled, a concept that had promised a different future, started seeing the contrast in real time. Games aired, effort stayed high, but the audience? Thinner than projected. Insiders say the comparison was brutal. One screen showing millions, another struggling to hold attention. That's when the panic crept in. Because panic doesn't arrive as noise, it arrives as silence. Phones stop ringing, meetings get longer, words get chosen carefully. At the head of the table sat Kathy Engelbert, listening to updates that no spreadsheet could soften. Numbers don't argue, they accuse. And the accusation was simple. The audience had moved. Then came the commentary. Not official statements, not press releases, conversations. Old quotes resurfacing, tone dissected. And one voice kept getting pulled into the conversation, Gino Auriemma. Context matters. Timing matters more. Comments that once sounded like standard competitive talk suddenly read differently against the new backdrop. Not because they were new, because the moment had changed. Fans connected dots, not always fairly, but loudly. The narrative hardened. They didn't see her. They didn't value her. They thought they could wait. That's how stories become symbols, and symbols are dangerous when you're negotiating power. Inside the league, reports suggest a scramble began.
After the 5 years, right? Let's see how well y'all do in the 5 years, and you will have something to fall back on. But yeah, and they were saying the average could be $1 million across the organization, across the league, right? If everything works out perfectly with the 5% extra on top. So, hey man, I don't know. It seems pretty good to me. Now, they did have some weird things in this improvement here. A few of them would be elimination of that grass testing, all right? That smoke is what we call it down here in Georgia, the smoke, okay? Now, it's crazy you would eliminate the test, but then you would add new treatment programs for grass or alcohol abuse. Like, what? Talk about contradicting yourself. I mean, yes, man. But shorter disqualification periods under anti-drug program. Interesting, man. Complimentary all-star tickets for all players. Now, I thought all players get this anyway, so I don't know. Yeah, okay. And then free WNBA league pass. Man, that's tough. That is tough, man. They can't even watch. They watching like us. That's crazy work.
The response came fast, but it came too late. And by the time the system tried to correct itself, the numbers had already delivered the real verdict. Calls placed, reevaluations ordered. What if we revisit the old framework? Someone asked. What if we sweeten it? Another voice suggested a reset. Not publicly. Quietly? Too quietly, because the timing betrayed the intent. Fans read it as begging, players read it as panic, and the audience, already drifting, saw confirmation that the system had misread the room. This is where the slap landed. Not from a statement, not from a tweet, from the numbers. Every appearance outside the league structure amplified the contrast. Every clip from NBC widened the gap. And every quiet weekend game with sparse engagement made the difference impossible to hide. Insiders say the most painful realization came late, after the calls, after the drafts, after the what-if scenario. If she had wanted the old deal, it would have happened earlier. Now, it was too late.
And they're actually not the only place that is preparing for it. Unrivaled is also a place that is preparing for a strike. We've heard it from other players. Like we've heard Natasha Cloud say, if there's a strike or there's a lockout in the WNBA, everybody can go and play in Unrivaled. Which brings me to my last point on Unrivaled.
You know, I know a lot of people are kind of like hating about being a part of Unrivaled and also trying to negotiate the WNBA, but it's like, I want two things to both be successful. And literally that's how I'm looking at it. Like, I'm looking at this from a pure business standpoint and how things can be great for everyone. I think that Unrivaled, the only thing that Unrivaled is showing is positive. We show players on social media or in games or wherever the case may be, people watch.
Right.
So we can't not have that for our summer season in the WNBA.
And this is where a lot of people from the beginning have been calling it a conflict of interest, because it clearly is. And I'm not saying that Breanna Stewart has bad intents. I don't actually think that she does. But she's saying, I want two things to both be successful. She cannot come out here and say that she cares about the WNBA more, she cares about Unrivaled, or she cares about Unrivaled more than she does the WNBA. She wants both of them to be successful. It's kind of impossible at this point, because you have the WNBA, who has, from the beginning,
In the end, the shift wasn't declared or negotiated. It revealed itself through attention, momentum, and a quiet change in who the audience chose to follow. Because leverage isn't something you announce, it's something you demonstrate. And she was demonstrating it every time she spoke to a national audience that followed her, not the logo. The league didn't lose a negotiation in public, it lost the room. That's the bitter truth the documents exposed. Not bad faith, not villains, just a system built for a slower era, colliding with a player who moved faster than the process. And in moments like that, even respected voices get caught in the undertow. Old hierarchies wobble, established authority feels challenged, not because someone declared war, but because the crowd chose differently. By the end of that week, one phrase kept repeating among insiders. Can we get her back? It wasn't literal, it was psychological. Could they recapture the momentum? Could they recenter the narrative? Could they convince fans that patience was still the play? The answer came back cold. The audience had already decided this wasn't revenge, it didn't need to be. The most effective response was silence. Show up, perform, let the numbers speak. And they did. Because when millions watch without being told to, contracts don't matter as much. When attention moves organically, leverage follows it. And when leverage shifts, negotiations stop feeling like talks and start feeling like consequences.
Back later this season, Cordell confirmed that she is scheduled to appear as an analyst for the Knicks vs. Thunder on March 29th. He also added that he hopes to see more of Clark moving forward, signaling that the door is open for additional appearances. While no expanded role has been formally announced, the comments suggested genuine interest rather than casual praise, i.e., they're not blowing smoke up her ass. A growing presence in sport media. Clark's success as an analyst fits into a big vision for NBC Sports as it looks ahead to its NBA coverage alongside the NFL, Olympics, and streaming platforms. Cordello referenced Clark as an example of how elite athletes can enhance broadcast authentic insight. For Clark, it is another step in building a multifaceted career. For NBC, it is a reminder that her voice goes well beyond the box score. Caitlin Clark nailed it, according to executives, in her NBC speaking analyst role.
What made this moment so unsettling wasn't conflict or controversy. It was the quiet loss of control, revealed through numbers, timing, and a future that moved on without waiting. That's why this moment felt like a nightmare to those in charge. Not because anyone was attacked, because control was. The documents didn't just leak terms. They leaked fear. Fear of losing relevance, fear of being bypassed, fear that the future wouldn't wait for permission. And the cruelest part? None of it required a confrontation. No press war, no public feud, no angry interviews. Just a platform, an audience, and a decision made earlier than everyone else. By the time the league tried to steady itself, the comparison was already set. NBC numbers on one side, struggling engagement on the other, and in between, a realization that talent plus timing beats process every time. That's how it ends. Not with a bang, with a shift. A shift where the old deal sounds desperate, where the old rules feel optional, and where the future no longer waits at the door. Because when the audience follows one person, the system learns too late what it should have done earlier. And that's the truth the leak couldn't hide.